back to my channel. My name is Nurse Dre and we do homeopathic medicine, true crime, and mysteries on this channel. We like to explore the weird shit. Today it is Mystery Monday, which means we are looking at a true crime case. Today we're talking about the story of Jenna Baldwin. But before we get into the video, make sure you do hit that subscribe button down below and leave me a like and let me know what you guys want to see next on the channel. Alright guys, so this is Jenna Baldwin. Jenna was born on May 7th, 1987. She was born in South Wales, UK. Of course to two parents, but her parents separated when she was, I think, 18 months old. So not too long after her parents separated, her mother would meet a man named Michael Baldwin, and things got really serious really fast. He seemed to really love Jenna and her mom. Like, Jenna would go everywhere with him, loved him to death. He would spoil her. She started calling him daddy. And finally, when the Baldwins got married in 1990, Jenna ended up taking Michael Baldwin's name. They ended up getting permission from Jenna's biological father, and he was okay with it, and Jenna took their name to kind of, I guess, fit in to the family. And not too long after that, they had two more kids. She has a little brother and a little sister. Now, Jenna was described as a very sweet, very smart child. Like, she was writing her name and her ABCs in, like, before she even went to preschool. She was very sweet, very coy, and didn't really cry that much, like a perfect baby. Now, when Jenna grew up and turned about 13 years old, that's when trouble kind of started in the family. She started sneaking out, getting into trouble, you know, doing the rebellious teenager thing, not really listening to her parents. And it was starting to become an issue. Like, she had gotten to the point where she didn't even want to go to school. And, you know, being 13, 14 years old, obviously your parents are going to make you go to school and finish getting your school diploma. And she wasn't having this. A few days before Jenna would eventually disappear, she got into a fight with her parents, and it was about going to school. And they were just like, you know what, until everybody, you know, simmers down and cools off, I think it'd be best if you, Jenna, stay with your aunt. So at the time that Jenna actually went missing, she was staying with her aunt, not too far away from the home. So on Wednesday, September 4th, 2002, Jenna was not at school. Her mom knew this. Her mom had left work early to come and talk to Jenna, maybe about, like, reconciling things and going to school. Hopefully, you know, she wanted to kind of talk her into it. And, you know, she just left work early to come talk to her daughter. Well, when she got to her house, she realized that Michael had basically locked Jenna out of the house, and Jenna was banging on the door, you know, screaming and just really pissed off. And so he had left the key in the door where nobody else could unlock the door. So Desiree, which is Jenna's mother, Desiree just said, you know what, let's cool off, let's go to your aunt's house. So they get into the car, Desiree and Jenna, and they start to drive over to Jenna's aunt's house. Well, on the way there, Desiree claims that the conversation in that car that day went very smoothly. She says that she was attempting to reconcile with her mother, saying things like, Mom, I promise you I'm gonna go back to school tomorrow. I'm gonna go to school. And I'm guessing, you know, when you as a child or a teenager get kicked out of your house or you leave your house, sometimes reality hits hard real fast. And she probably didn't like it at her aunt's house. It wasn't home. It wasn't what she was used to. She probably didn't even have her own space. We don't know. We can only speculate. But what Desiree says is she was planning on going to school and they were reconciling things. But she drops Jenna back off at her aunt's house and drives back to work that day. Now, that was the last time that, sadly, Desiree would ever see Jenna again. So the next day, Jenna does not turn up at school. Even though she's promised her mother that she will go to school, she's not there. Her friends haven't seen her. Nobody has seen her. And I guess her mother is a little bit worried, but knowing the kind of, like, rebellious state she was in, she wasn't too worried that she didn't show up for school. She probably just thought she stayed at home at her aunt's house or she was back at their house. And she did get home later on that night, didn't find Jenna, tried to call Jenna, cell phone rang. She never answered. And she, I guess she just didn't talk to Jenna's aunt that night. I don't know, but by that weekend, Jenna's mom, Desiree, started getting very scared. She was calling all the family members, calling all of her friends. She was calling anybody that she possibly could to see if they had seen Jenna, and no one in the family or the friends group had seen Jenna. The last time the friends had seen her was Thursday the 5th around lunchtime, and nobody knew anything after that. So Monday rolls around, and Michael, Desiree's husband, you know, Jenna's stepdad, he comes to Desiree and he said, oh, by the way, Jenna called today, and she said to just let you know she was okay. She was staying with a friend and she'd be home, you know, soon. And you know, Desiree's like, well, that's weird. You didn't ask her where she was or any like questions or anything? He's like, nope, she sounded good. She sounded normal. So what was that? Well, then Tuesday rolls around, and Michael works, I guess, from home at nighttime, and so he stays at home during the day and he sleeps during the day. Well, on Tuesday, Michael, when Desiree got home from work, Michael claimed that Jenna had in fact come home that day, and she had come home with a new friend that he didn't know or recognize. She had red hair, but he didn't know her name, and he didn't know if that had been the girl that Jenna had been staying with while she was missing, or you know what. And he stated that she took a shower, got a change of clothes, and left again. And Desiree was a little upset about this again because, you know, he wasn't asking her like, where were you, where you been, are you gonna stay here, talk to your mother, talk these things out instead of just run away. But he didn't pay much attention to her, and she walked right back out the door without ever speaking to her mother or anyone else for that matter. So Thursday the 14th of September rolls around. Jenna still hasn't spoken to or seen her mother. You know, even though she's called home and she's come home, her mother has not laid her own eyes on her, so she's very worried about her and the state of her mental health. And that day, a truancy officer comes to their house from the school system, you know, wanting to have a meeting with the family about what they're going to do about Jenna's truancy. I mean, she hadn't been coming to school. This is illegal. They have to make their children go to school. And during the meeting, Michael brings up some very eye-opening information. Michael states that the day that Jenna had come home with that new friend of hers, that the girls had been acting really loopy, like they didn't care about anything. Their eyes were kind of rolling back in their heads. They were laughing hysterical, insinuating that Jenna and this new friend of hers were on drugs. That pissed off Desiree even more, because if you knew that these kids were on drugs, why did you let her walk back out of the house? Why did you let her leave? Why didn't you ever tell me this? Because if she had known this, Desiree would have went straight to the police. Because even though Jenna had been, you know, doing some things rebellious and hanging out with older kids and stuff, she wasn't the kind to be into drugs. So that was very out of character for her. And so Desiree really starts worrying at this point. And so finally the truancy officer and everybody, they talk the Baldwins into filing a police report that evening of Jenna's disappearance. So Jenna is last seen on a Wednesday. On the 4th, they don't file a missing persons report until the 14th, so 10 days later. And I guess that shows you what kind of situation they thought they were in. But, you know, Michael had told Desiree, look, I've seen her, I've heard from her, she's fine. And so I'm guessing that's why they never called police. But it would turn out to be a huge mistake. So police began interviewing the parents, of course, and they find out that Michael is the last one to be seen or to have seen Jenna. So they bring him in for a second interview, and during the interview he acts like she's just a runaway. He doesn't seem like he's very, you know, wavered by the fact that she's missing or anything, and he just looks real relaxed.
No, we got on with when she was Jenna, until she started growing up, and then she's, you know, they get bigger and bigger, and then they start getting cheeky, man.
So police also thought it was weird that Michael, if he thought she was on drugs, or regardless of the drug thing, why didn't he ask the questions that a regular parent would ask when his daughter came home? You know, this child had grown up in his arms. This was like his own daughter. Why was he not treating her like his own daughter? You know, trying to discipline her or ask her any questions about anything. And police thought this was like the #1 fishy thing. You know, they didn't understand it. Whatever. But police start to move on to her friends groups, and her friends paint a very different picture of Jenna. Despite Michael Baldwin saying that Jenna was like this rebellious teenager who had run away, all of her friends and all of the people that they talked to from school said the complete opposite. They said Jenna was very smart, caring, outgoing. She could get along with anyone. She had a really straight head on her shoulders, a good head on her shoulders, and she wasn't into a lot of trouble, even though she was mature for her age and she hung out with older people, yes, granted, but she was never into trouble or drugs or anything. So I guess that was kind of like one of the first things that made police think, well, maybe she's not a runaway. But then at the same time, her friends did mention that Jenna had said several times that her home life wasn't great, that she wanted to run away to London and didn't want to be in that town anymore around her family. So at the same time, police investigators still had to consider in the back of their minds that this still could be a missing person, but it's probably a runaway. So police send a forensics team to Jenna's home, and they find that if Jenna had run away, it was very suspicious due to the fact that she had not taken a single personal item with her, and the police thought that the day that she had come home originally, she had not even got a change of clothes because nothing in her room had looked touched or was missing. You know, things that were important to Jenna were still there, things they thought that she would take with her, even like a little bag or something, you know, to throw some clothes in. All of that kind of stuff was still in her room. So it starts to lead investigators into like, maybe this child was abducted. Now in this forensics investigation, they're also looking for any of red hair or like some kind of like proof of who this friend was that Jenna had brought home that day with her, because Jenna had never hung out with a redheaded girl. They didn't know who she was. They didn't even get a name, so they were trying their best to like identify who she was with to hopefully go to them next and see if she was staying with them and rule out them as a suspect. Well, no red hair is found, no fingerprints are found, nothing is found that is proving that this girl was even there at that house that day. It's really strange. So investigators and Desiree, Jenna's mom, decide to go to the press. They're gonna go to the press and do as many interviews as they possibly can to try to get the public's help to see if anyone in the surrounding area had seen Jenna anywhere. In the UK, they tried to get as much headline attention as they possibly could, and they got a lot of attention for this case, and leads did start coming in.
And Jenna, if you're listening, just pick up the phone. That's all we want to do is just do you're safe, and that's the main. Just at the moment, just pick up the phone.
Some people were saying they were seeing Jenna in Cartworth, and there was a woman on CCTV cameras in the shops there that looked like Jenna, and police went through the long, laborious, intensive work of going through all this footage and then finding out that it wasn't Jenna. It was kind of like these leads were not really going anywhere, and it wasn't helping the case at all. So they started putting out posters, and they reached out to so many media outlets and did whatever they could to get Jenna's name out, because they knew the more the media and the public knew about Jenna missing, the more likely she would possibly be found. And so they got desperate and did this. Now, news began to surface about Jenna having a boyfriend, and I don't think that Desiree had told the cops this originally, that she had a boyfriend, because they weren't really dating at the time. But when Jenna was 13 years old, she started dating a guy named Chris Jones, and Chris Jones was 3 years her senior, so she was 13 when they started dating. He was 17, so 4 years her senior. But he was really nice to Jenna, and Jenna was so mature for her age that her mom didn't have a problem with it. However, Michael did have a problem with it because of their age. And so he and Chris didn't really get along, but it was said that Jenna dated him for 2 years and they had a really good relationship. Like I said, he treated her good. They would hang out all the time. But by the time she was 15 years old and this all happened, she had broken up with him because basically she just outgrew him, and it was, time for them to move on or whatever. But he was questioned, and even though her breaking up with him was hard for Chris, he stated that they stayed friends afterward and they didn't have any problems. Like, there was no issues between them, and they were even seen like a week or so before her disappearance just chilling, and nobody said they were fighting or anything, so they were just hanging out as friends. But police had to do their job, so they sent a forensic team out to Chris Jones' house, and in his bedroom they find some not so great things. The first thing that they found that was really strange was a notebook of drawings, and in the drawing book it had where Chris had drawn coffins with Jenna's name on them that said "Rest in Peace, Jenna." They also found some blood in his room that where it looked like somebody had cleaned up some blood, and this didn't look good, and police ended up arresting him for murder because, I mean, what else does it look like, right? So the police bring him in a second time. You know, he'd already been interviewed amicably, but this time he's under arrest for the murder of Jenna. And this time he ain't saying shit. He won't talk to them about anything. He's not answering a single question. So they just have to wait for the forensic evidence to come back, and when it does, it shocks every one of them. The blood is not Jenna's, and they find out that also in that book of the coffin drawing, Jenna had also drew some coffins with her name on it, and it looked like art was just something that they did together to express themselves. So pretty quickly he was let off the hook and he was released back into the public without any other questions. Now, we talked about how they had reached out to the public. Well, now the police are back at square one. They're hoping that the public comes forward with something, and they kind of do. Police headquarters start getting these phone calls. They're random phone calls. Even the family members are getting phone calls, and they're from like payphones, and the person that's calling, but the person isn't talking. He's like, they're talking in like a whisper, they're purring, they're like breathing heavily, sometimes just silent. So police think that it could be Jenna, but they don't know. And so how many times am I gonna call her Gemma? Police just don't know if this is her, and they start wondering, maybe should they start like looking at, you know, like should they start surveillancing these payphones around the city, because that's just where they're coming in from, and by the time they get down to that payphone, no one's there, and no one around there has seen a woman that looks like Jenna. Anyways, they're back to square one. They have no idea what's going on. Well, a really huge break comes in the case, and it starts with the phone records of Michael Baldwin. Now remember, Michael had said that Monday after she disappeared that she called him and told him that she was fine and to tell her mother that she would be back soon. Well, it turns out that phone call never happened. Literally, he never got a phone call from Jenna. And this, police were like, why would you lie, dude? Why would you lie about that? That's so suspicious. And then they start thinking, well, shit, we never found any evidence of anyone being in Jenna's room the next day. So if she never called him, did she ever go home? And so is this whole thing about us thinking that she's alive, is it all a ruse by Michael? And it starts to get a little scary and spooky. So because of this, police start to believe that Michael could be the one that's making these anonymous phone calls to try to make it look like Jenna's still alive. So they end up putting up some surveillance out on Michael. And in the meantime, they decide to speak to a forensic psychologist. And with this forensic psychologist, they want to know, in a criminal's mind, what could be a trigger to make Michael Baldwin either confess or lead us to Jenna's body if he's killed her. And the psychologist gives them a lot of pointers, and they start to set up their ultimate trap. What they decide to do is they go to Desiree and Michael and they say, look, if we don't hear from Jenna in the next few days, we're gonna turn up the heat on this investigation so hot that something's bound to happen. And this ends up putting so much pressure on Michael Baldwin that immediately, when the investigators leave their house for telling them this, he immediately goes to a store, buys a throwaway cell phone in a false name. They watch him go to a phone booth, open up the cell phone brand new, activate it, and start calling Jenna's mother Desiree from it. And he starts pretending that he is Jenna. Now, they watch him leave the phone booth. He goes to the car park, he throws away all the evidence, like the box, the bag, everything that goes to the phone, throws it away. Well, of course, police sees that, so they're able to get the IMEI number, the serial number off the phone. They're able to get all fingerprints all over the box to prove that he's done this. Now they just have to wait and see what happens. So like I said, he starts calling and texting Jenna's mom, Desiree, and makes her think that this is him. And like I said, he's doing the same thing. He's purring, he's whispering, he's heavy breathing, just doing creepy shit, but he's not really acting like a girl. He's just trying to make her think it's her. And then to make her think even further that it's Jenna, he starts texting her saying, it's Jenna, I'm okay, I'm alive, I'm fine. And for the next 2 months, this puts Desiree in the worst position of her life. So much stress she's under because she knows Jenna's alive, but she doesn't know if she's okay. She doesn't know who's with her. She doesn't know where she is. She can't tell her where she is. And it's just putting Jenna's mom through hell. straight hell. And mind you, police are watching Michael Baldwin make every single one of these text messages and phone calls. So Desiree goes to the police. She says, look, I'm getting these phone calls and these texts from this person that says that they're Jenna, but I'm not too sure I believe it's Jenna because first of all, Jenna can spell and this person can't spell. And she's even like, she's starting to ask questions that only Jenna would know. Like, hey, we were in your grandfather's house that one time and we painted a picture on the wall. What was it? And an answer finally comes back and it's the wrong answer. So Desiree is very upset. Now she's like, oh, this shit, it ain't him. It ain't her that's calling me. So she calls detectives back and she's like, never mind, it's not her. She don't know the answers to her own questions, so I know it's somebody else. But then the right answer comes in a text message. And this convinces Desiree that it is Jenna and she is still alive. Now, said Michael Baldwin is sitting outside his house at this point in his car making these text messages, so they know, you know, the police are watching the whole thing, but they're so eager to catch him in this shit and make sure that these charges stick, whatever they put on him, and they are dead set on finding Jenna's body, or Jenna, period, wherever she is. They're just dead set on finding her and returning her to her family. So they wait. So to get a more clear picture of the relationship dynamic between Jenna and Michael Baldwin, the police start to go back to the friends and ask questions. They go to the neighbors and ask, well, friends have new stories to tell the police. They have stories about when they would be over at Jenna's house and Michael would just come in out of the blue, start yelling and cussing Jenna, tell her and her friends to get the fuck out. And by the time their friends got outside and she come out 5 minutes later behind them, he had already shoved her, whatever, and she has already told them she doesn't want to live there anymore and she is not happy. And this is why she wanted to run away. Now, neighbors have a real story for the cops. And neighbors, they say that 1 week before the disappearance of Jenna, Jenna was outside screaming at the top of her lungs, banging on the front door, trying to get in because Michael had locked her out yet again. And she was saying something to the effect of, don't worry, Michael, when my mom finds out what you've done, you'll be the one leaving. And as soon as she says this, the dynamic changes and she's swept into the house real quickly. And after that, they hear the door slam and they hear Jenna yelling and screaming, but they don't know what's going on and they never call the police. I guess they just thought it was like a dad-daughter kind of thing and stayed out of it. But this is telling police, oh shit, so there's motive here. There's actual motive because whatever Jenna has said to Michael, whatever he's done, she's threatened him now to go tell her mother, which threatens his livelihood basically, and threatens him getting exposed, losing his children. We don't know what the secret is, but we know it was significant. Otherwise, Jenna would have never wanted to run away, A, and she would have never said that her mom was going to leave him if she found out. So we know there's motive here, and this is a pivotal moment in the case. So further investigation into Michael's financial records would enlighten the case just a little bit further. When it comes to his alibi for Friday, September 6th, the day after she disappeared, he had told police that he had gone and dropped off the younger two children at school and came back home and went to bed around 9 o'clock because he had worked the night before. But it turns out that the financial records proved that he was actually in town that day, later than 9 o'clock, withdrawing money out of an ATM and going to a hardware store and buying a fucking shovel. A shovel! So because of this, a huge body search was launched at this point because what the hell else are they gonna do? You know, they have to find the body to make the murder stick. They search high and low. They search through all the towns around South Wales. They, you know, search the culverts and the creeks and the rivers, whatever, the lakes. They don't find anything, and they finally sent a forensics team back to the Baldwin's house. But both of those searches would turn up absolutely nothing. And during this time, Michael would actually grow to be increasingly more agitated with the cops. He wasn't working with them anymore. Anytime they would come and tell the family any information, he would storm out of the room when they would talk about Jenna, or, you know, he just wasn't cooperating. But he was confident that if he could make them believe that Jenna was still alive, that he would they would stop looking for Jenna and the whole investigation would stop. So he continues to send the text messages and all this other bullshit. Well, police are finally at the point where they're fed up and they're ready for him to, you know, lead them to the body. They're done with this investigation. They know what's going on. They know. So lead us to the body, dude. So they go back to this criminal psychologist, and they devise another plan to really draw Michael out. And so this next plan goes into effect. They call Desiree up and they say, look, Desiree, text that phone number back that Jenna's texting from, and you tell them if that's Jenna, that she needs to put something personal of Jenna's in the mail and send it to your house. Right. They know that this has got to be the only thing that will work, that will have Michael lead them to the body, because now that they've turned up the heat, they're making sure that he has to return to the body to get something personal off of her that would be on her if she were missing, and he's got to send it to the house so that he can convince the police that she's still alive and that they can stop the investigation. But it doesn't go quite as planned. But they do watch Michael under surveillance. They watch him go to one of those public mailbox things where you just drop in mail on the side of the road. They see him drop an envelope in there, and they're like, all right, okay. So a few days later, when Desiree says to police, hey, she sent something, they all open it together, and it turns out to be an engagement ring of Desiree's. It has nothing to do with Jenna, and in fact, Jenna had never even been seen with it, but Michael Baldwin is telling the cops, look, I've seen her wear that several times, but Desiree assures the cops she's never seen her with it or even wearing it. So it didn't prove anything. So they tell the Baldwins, look, we're gonna put this through our forensic team and see what comes of the envelope forensics. So when the forensics come back, Michael's DNA is all over the letter where he has licked the seal and sealed the envelope closed. His other daughter's DNA is on the stamp where he had his daughter lick the stamp and put it on there. I guess maybe thinking that her DNA would match Desiree's, I don't know. At this point, they have enough to arrest Michael Baldwin for murder. So on October 29, 2002, police arrest Michael Baldwin for the murder of Jenna Baldwin. Now, upon original questioning, Mike refuses to tell the truth about what happened. He maintains his innocence, and they just put him in jail and wait. And eventually, Michael starts pleading and calling Desiree, begging her to come see him. And finally, Desiree, see, at the beginning, Desiree was taken to his defense. She was like, there's no way he did this. But when cops actually showed her and the family the evidence that they had against him, like he was the one making the texts and the phone calls this entire time, he was the one that mailed the ring, all of this stuff, she's then like, oh shit, you know? So she refuses to come see him in jail, but she does say this, if you tell me where Jenna's body is, I'll come see you. And at first he's like, how would I know, you know, acting dumb, but finally he's like, fine, just come in and I'll tell you where she is. So they get all excited, they go up, they're geared up, they're ready for a confession, they get there, Desiree sits down and he says, I don't know where the fuck she is. Men. So she walks out. Well, over the next few weeks, Michael sends out several pleas again to see her again, to see the children. You know, he just wants his family, and she's not answering the phone calls from the jail. She's not going to the jail. She's not answering letters from the jail, nothing. So one night she's visiting Michael's parents, and Michael gets his mother on the phone, who hands Desiree the phone. And she gets on the phone with him, and she's like, Michael, I'm not having anything to do with you, and if you're not going to tell me where my daughter is, I'm never going to let you see your children again. See, he didn't quite anticipate that move, and he knew it was serious. So finally, by the end of that phone call, Michael Baldwin told Desiree where Jenna was.
He said to me, she's over the keeper's pond, down over in one of the laybys.
Now, even though he's told investigators and Desiree at this point where Jenna's body is, investigators search high and low. They can't find any disturbed area in this wooded area he says they're at. You know, he says it's by this certain pond in this certain area. They cannot find it, so they end up having to bring Michael Baldwin out there to identify where he buried the body, and cops still didn't believe he was going to show them anything, because at this time he still hadn't even admitted that he had killed anybody. So they take him out there, and literally within the first few seconds, he points out exactly where they would eventually find poor Jenna Baldwin's remains, dug in a shallow grave, buried and covered up like just nothingness. Like she didn't matter to anyone in the world. This was her father. So yeah, on Tuesday, November 19th, 2002, the body of Jenna was found. Police take Michael back to the station and they ask for a full confession, and this is Michael's confession. Michael states that the day before she disappeared, she had come home and he was sleeping, and she was yelling and cussing him. They got in a huge fight, and they ended up at the top of their stairs on their second level in their house, and in a fit of rage and like the fight and everything, he like reared back and hit her, and it knocked her down the stairs. And by the time she landed on the ground at the bottom of the stairs, she was no longer breathing. He claims that he scooped her up, panicked, and put her in the car and had every intention of driving her to the hospital, but on the way, freaked out, panicked, and pulled over and decided to bury her. Well, this is kind of out of character or out of line, because if you remember, he had gone and bought that shovel that day. So he would have already had to have the shovel with him to pull over and bury her right then. Otherwise, he would have had to premeditate, and he would have had to leave her in the car, go get the shovel, and then go bury her. So it didn't make sense. And so police, they send back in this forensics team back into the house, and the forensic team discovers that because of the layout of their house, and because there was no damage to the house, no repairs to the house, nothing on the stairs, it didn't look like Jenna had fallen down the stairs at all. And furthermore, the 2 autopsies that were done on Jenna's remains showed there were no broken bones. If she had died from a fall down the stairs, she would at least have a broken neck, something to show why she died. That's how you die when you fall down the stairs. You break your neck and die. But she didn't have any of this. And in fact, both of the autopsies, the cause of death would be proven indeterminable. Basically, they couldn't figure it out. But police did find out that a little secret of Michael's could probably be the culprit. Now, Michael was a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and in order to receive the level of brown belt, he would have had to know 5 ways of strangling a human being. And even though he would have only had to shown 5 ways of strangling a human, he would have had to known 10. So like, police believe that in the fit of this fight, he lost his shit and strangled her, because like I said, she had no broken bones or other cause of death. So they believe the story about them getting into a fight, but they really think that he just strangled her, or he could have premeditated it. But Michael Baldwin still to this day maintains that it was all a misunderstanding, you know, a horrible thing, and he never meant to do any of it. And he sticks with his original story. But I guess he thought that that would get him out of a jail sentence. I don't know, but it doesn't. Police don't even really think it was like in the heat of an argument. They think that like in a couple of arguments leading up to the death of Jenna, she had threatened to tell Mike's secret, whatever the secret was. You know, we can only speculate, but like anything that would make her mother leave Michael because he had done something to her could only be the very worst that you could do to a child. So police speculate that that was his motive. He knew she was going to tell on him whatever he had done, and he couldn't let that happen and strangled her. So on Tuesday, June 10th, 2003, the trial of Michael Baldwin for the murder of Jenna Baldwin began, and only 7 weeks later, he was found guilty of murder in the 1st degree and sentenced to a life in prison without the possibility of parole. Poor Desiree has had to pick up the pieces, knowing that the entire time she was sleeping with the man who would be her first little girl's murderer, her baby's murderer. She had a hard time living with this for a long time. It still bothers her to this day that she doesn't know what Jenna's last secret was. She wished she did, but a part of me thinks that maybe it's best that she doesn't know that secret, because it could only make the pain and the torture worse on the family. It could only be worse. And hopefully whatever was done to Jenna was stopped from Michael doing it to his other 2 children. Honestly, let's just hope that that happened. It stopped somewhere. I can only imagine what that secret was, and I can't imagine how you're gonna raise a little girl to grow and love you, but you're just ready to dispose of her so quickly, so shallow-ish and so neglectfully. I just don't see how some people can throw away life so carelessly and just not care 2 shits about other people, especially about your own daughter, someone you raised for 15 years. I'll never understand it, but you guys, I know it was a long one. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this Mystery Monday, and make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, leave me a like, and let me know what you want to hear next, please. Thanks guys for watching.
you.